2006.
Yes,
I think you know where I'm going with this one.
I do.
I just can't stand the hypocrisy because in 2011, I thought the precedent had been set. Can't have two teams in the same conference, same division, play for a national championship again in a rematch. I just don't get it because in that 2006 season, in fact, I think even after the Ohio State Michigan game, the BCS computers still had Ohio State won Michigan too,
Yes.
and it was a controversial game I remember cringing because I remember that play when Troy Smith was it was third and forever, country mile, and then Sean Crable hit him out of bounds,
Yep.
and then gave him a free set of downs, which they. Without that, I really think Michigan had that game won. Because that was at a time when defense kind of took a back seat. Neither defense was stopping the other team. So if Michigan could have scored, which I imagine they did, and ran the clock out, Michigan had that game won.
Well, I think that's a bit overstated myself, but I get your point
I
that
mean, there's obviously going to be some assumption, but
they would have had the opportunity, yes, to win the game, where as it stood, they didn't have the opportunity to win the game. Ohio State ran out the clock with a 3-point lead, so it's not like Michigan had the ball down 3 and driving down the field with an opportunity to win. So even though the score was a 3-point game, it wasn't a 3-point game with the game on the line, Michigan with the ball. Ohio
yeah,
State ran out the clock. But to your credit, yes, that was a play that could have changed the game. Yes, Michigan would have gotten the ball, and we don't know.
yeah. I mean, but it just seems like at least late in the second half, neither defense could stop the other team's offense. So based on that, I was pretty confident that Michigan could have scored.
Well,
And
Michigan had stopped Ohio State's offense.
apparently they didn't. I mean, technically they did, but in the literal sense, no, because of that stupid play. And Michigan was a top 2 team. I mean, I remember that season. Well, that season, Wisconsin only had one loss too. The Big Ten was clearly, without question, the best conference that year. I don't think this is even up for debate.
Well, I would have to go back and really look at it. I think it is up for debate. Who did these teams defeat out of conference? That's the issue. You are looking at the top of the conference and seeing that Ohio State was undefeated until they lost the championship game. Michigan only had one loss to Ohio State before the Rose Bowl, and that Wisconsin only lost one game. But did those teams beat anyone out of conference? The answer is basically no.
Yeah,
Michigan had a great win against Notre Dame in terms of they blasted
tore 'em
Notre
up.
Dame. What was that, 38-0? But that Notre Dame team in 06, I'd have
I
to
think
go
they
back and
ended
look
like
at
10-3 or something.
And yes, you might be right. 06, I think, no, it was the next year. No, that might have been the year that, the Brady Quinn team lost to LSU in the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, now every conference has their losers, but I mean, Michigan was a rightful number 2, and I mean, I know that Florida
Well, they
and
didn't win a
USC.
conference. They didn't win a conference, and Florida played a brutal schedule and won the SEC, which was arguably the best conference.
I still put them as a silver medal in conferences that year. I mean, I'm not saying that
Well,
Florida
yes,
wasn't.
I know you do, but uh,
I'm not saying that especially because they didn't even have Tebow. That was the Chris Leak year. So I mean, for them to do that was pretty impressive. That was trying to think. That was the team. That was the team that lost to Auburn. Was it
I think they lost to LSU. I'd have
LSU?
to double check. Let me see. 06 LSU beat. Yes, they did lose to Auburn 27-17.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a respectable loss.
Yeah, so that Florida team.
I mean, I don't think it's as good of a loss as losing by a field goal in the shoe.
Oh no, but that's only one of. Look at this run of games. Tennessee was number 13. They beat them by one. That Bama team, '06, wasn't that good. LSU, they beat them by 13. That LSU team won the Sugar Bowl. Lost to Auburn by 10. Beat Georgia by a touchdown.
I'm seeing a lot of close games there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
other
a lot
than
of close
the
games.
out of the conference crap, probably
Yeah.
their
A lot of close
prob-
games.
probably their
But I
best.
don't know how you leave a team that won arguably the best conference in America and was 12-1, how you leave them out of the BCS championship game. I totally get your point that when Ohio State and Michigan stepped off the field, I thought that they were the best teams in the country and that they should have rematched in a championship game. However, the postseason kind of proved that they weren't the two best teams in the country.
Yeah, I mean, and you argue the hindsight, but I don't. I think that you should go by who was still the two best teams, and it seemed like it
We don't
was
know who, anytime somebody
well,
says the best teams in the country, we don't know who the best teams are.
okay, most deserving. How about that? I
Sure.
mean, do you think that Florida was most deserving simply because of the close loss in the game?
I think that they were because, and I understand the Michigan point. Again, in if we would rewind 17 years, I was arguing for Michigan to be in the BCS championship game.
And so were the computers, and so were a lot of analysts.
Well, no, the computers were until Florida then went and won the SEC championship game against a team that was ranked eighth in the country.
Oh, you mean going in to the actual bowls after the conference championships? The computers had put Florida over Michigan.
Well, yeah, I don't know how the breakdown was. We could see, let's see here. In 2006, is that's what I've got up here, yeah. So the here's the Harris interactive poll. Had Ohio State 1, Florida 2,
Oh, I'm surprised you were able to find that.
Michigan 3. Okay, the AP, to your point, the AP after the Ohio State game. So after Ohio State beat Michigan, actually the AP had USC at number 2 and Michigan at 3 and Florida at 4.
Huh.
And then the next week, after Florida beat Florida State, oh, I'm sorry, after Florida beat Arkansas in the SEC title game, they moved up Florida to 2 because USC lost to whoever they lost to. I forget who they lost to. Did they lose to UCLA? Anyway, doesn't matter. They lost and dropped to 8. And so, yeah, Florida moved past Michigan. So regardless of what USC did, they moved up Florida past Michigan after they won the SEC championship game. That was in the AP poll. The coaches poll, is all of this on screen?
No, it's still stuck on the schedule for Florida.
Oh, I thought you were seeing all this while I'm doing all this.
No, no, it's been stuck on the Florida schedule.
Oh, I was showing all this. Um, so this is the coaches poll. So after Ohio State beat Michigan, again, they had the same lineup: 1, 2, 3, 4. Ohio State, USC, Michigan, Florida. Then they did the same thing, moved Florida past USC after they won the SEC.
Well, I was remember thinking that it was the computers that liked Michigan, and the human voters were like in Florida. Yeah, so I mean, I would have liked to have seen a rematch based on that, but I just think that this was seemed like the first year in my recent memory that politics started playing a role in who gets it. I mean, more than just the typical X's and O's, but it started becoming more about feelings and ratings and appeasement.
Yeah, but I don't know how you can argue that though. That I think that's your feeling.
I'm sure it probably just is my feeling.
Well, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying how do you know? Because Florida did have the argument of there shouldn't be a rematch. We won the SEC. We won an extra game, etc. I
Well, I
think
mean,
Florida played a better schedule, but they're close.
well, I would say that no two Florida wins were on par with Notre Dame and Wisconsin.
Oh, whoa, whoa.
Would you say that there were two? What LSU was probably their best win?
Well, yeah, from a record standpoint, they don't have uh, a win on par with Wisconsin. We did look at Wisconsin's year, and that was nothing to write home about in terms of their schedule. Um, you're right that Wisconsin had the best record. Now again, there's Florida, like Tennessee. I don't think finished in the top 13 in the country.
No.
I believe they finished like 9-4. I'm almost positive they finished 9-4. Yeah, that Tennessee team lost to Penn State in the Outback Bowl. LSU won the Sugar Bowl over Notre Dame. So both LSU and Michigan crushed Notre Dame. That Auburn team was good. They weren't great. They lost that game on the road by 10. Georgia, Mark Richt, not one of his better teams.
And that was a neutral field. Always is.
Yes. And to your point, a lot of one-score games, a lot of tight games. Shoot, they beat South Carolina by 1 point.
Yeah.
They beat Vandy by 6. Yeah, they were squeaking by. And that Florida State game, which normally would be a big win, that Florida State team, I'm almost positive, went 7-6. So they weren't anything great. Yeah,
Yeah.
Tennessee was 9-4. Kentucky was 8-5. Georgia was 9-4. They beat them. Arkansas finished 10-4 after they lost to Wisconsin. The Auburn team that they lost to went 11-2.
Yeah, and if they'd have won that game, well, they'd have been undefeated. But if they had lost another team, and that Auburn win, that would have been on par with a Wisconsin team.
Well, the LSU, I would put LSU on par with Wisconsin.
Mm.
Actually, I think LSU was better than Wisconsin. They didn't have the record, but they were 11-2. So I get your points, and I agree with your points. I'm not arguing with them, although I'm playing devil's
That
advocate.
I figured that.
I do think that, and you're right, the same logic was not wielded 5 years later.
That's my biggest gripe. Be consistent. If you just don't want a rematch for a national championship, fine, I get it. You know, don't don't do it. I mean, especially because I don't think there were a lot of people wanting to see that. Considering the fact that the first game with LSU and Alabama, that could have been sponsored by Sominex. I remember watching that game. I'm going like, oh god.
Is that how
I'm
we're
trying
supposed
to.
to be selecting teams because we don't like how they play? Like we would have during that era, especially we would have had two teams from the Big 12 playing every championship game.
If if they were 12-0 and 11-1,
And the thing that I will say about the Bama LSU matchup as opposed to Ohio State Michigan, those were the two best teams in the country. That's difficult to debate. Like I would put a mortgage on it. They were just those were two NFL teams. Like they were so good. Like
like I said,
Oklahoma State would have gotten trounced by
yeah,
either one of them.
I don't know if I go trounced. I think they probably would have lost to Alabama. I know they would have lost to LSU.
Yeah, that
But
LSU team just smashed maybe one of the greatest schedules, not maybe one of the greatest schedules, one of the most difficult schedules ever.
yeah, I agree with that one. I just, I mean, I guess I just kind of, give them an asterisk on that loss given the circumstances. And just, I don't know what it is about Iowa, but I mean, everybody, talks about how hard it is to win in Kinnick. I've seen a lot of championship dreams go down in Ames for some stupid reason. I mean, I don't think it has the same mystique as Iowa City, but I've seen Ames kind of ruined. I think they've done it to Oklahoma once or twice.
That Iowa State team went 6-7.
Oh, they're not good. I mean, and there were times where, Iowa wasn't really good on paper, but for some reason, well, I mean, when we lost them on a late, last second field goal, they weren't great. When they just blew the doors off of Ohio State, they weren't that. I mean, they were good, but they weren't great. So I mean, something about these Iowa teams, they might not be 10, 11 win games or 11 win teams, but for some stupid reason, I don't get it. You just can't play in their stadiums. It just something weird happens. So based on that, I like I said, I've seen teams play Iowa State in Ames, and on paper they should win, even on the road, but just something happens. And keep in mind, the tragedy that just happened. I would have still had Oklahoma State over Alabama personally.
Oh, I would too, based on merit, but I don't think there's any. Like, if you're asking me my opinion, those two teams would have beaten Oklahoma State by 3 touchdowns. But if you're asking me who deserved it, who earned it, well, Alabama already got its shot. Oklahoma State only had 1 loss. Stanford only had 1 loss.
I don't think anybody was really blowing the horn for Stanford, though, were they?
I don't know that Stanford didn't play a better schedule than Oklahoma State.
I'd have to go through it, but I'll take your word on that one.
Well, the reason that Oklahoma State was getting all the love is because of the circumstances, number one, of their loss, and number two, because they won the Big 12. Stanford did not win the Pac-12 because their 1 loss was head-to-head against Oregon. And Oregon only lost 1 Pac-12 game.
Oh. Yeah, okay. I guess I can.
And they got whipped by Oregon. So I'm not touting Stanford that they should have been considered. They got blown out by Oregon by 23. But 2012 Stanford had a argument.
Oh, was that when they played
Year.
Wisconsin?
Yeah, they played Wisconsin. I'm sorry, Oregon had the better argument. So the Oregon team that did not play the year Alabama and Notre Dame played in the BCS championship game, that Oregon team went 12-1, beat a top 5 Kansas State team in the Fiesta Bowl, and their 1 loss was to a 1-loss Stanford team, 17-14 in overtime.
Yeah, and I was a big fan of that Kansas State team. I think was that miracle run with Colin Klein.
Yes.
I remember thinking it almost kind of reminds me of the 2010 Auburn team where their quarterback pretty much just strapped the team on his back and carried them to as close to the promised land as Kansas State's ever going to get, at least.
Yeah.
Because Kansas State was ranked number 1 for
Yes.
a few weeks in the season.